Okay, so lights, camera, action. This is movies, motion pictures. Thanks for coming. I'm Michael Malgeri. I'm with MarkLogic, and I'm with my colleague Eric Weaver, who formerly was from the Entertainment Technology Center.
Actually, technically, I still work there, too.
You still work there? Okay.
2 60-hour-a-week
okay,
jobs are way better
he's
than
holding
one.
down 2 jobs. Okay, he's also with Western Digital. We both live in Los Angeles, so if any of you want to get into the movie business, we're the guys to see. Okay, let's do lunch. I know a guy who knows a guy, that kind of thing. So, motion picture data, semantics, NoSQL, what's that got to do with movies and movie production? Well, a movie is a product. Okay, it goes through a life cycle like any other manufactured product or service. And let's take a look. To put that in perspective, let's go through a that was then, this is now kind of thing. You guys recognize some of these things depending on your age. Probably on the left there, that's a Cheerios box. If you look closer, you can see it's a very classic Cheerios box. It comes from Google Images, but it's about from 1950. And the reason I put it up there is to illustrate if you went down the cereal aisle or the supermarket aisle way back when, you didn't have many choices. You had Cheerios, anybody else? Corn Flakes, maybe? Rice Krispies, right? And we'll look at the now picture later. Same thing with what we used to call sneakers are now running shoes. And then in the media and entertainment world, anybody know what that is on the right there? Call out? It's test pattern, right. TV used to sign off somewhere around 11, 12 o'clock at night. Saturday morning we wake up and listen to that sound before it would turn on again to see the cartoons. So, but now we have the 24-hour cycle. So that was then. Today, if you go to buy Cheerios, you have at least 8 different choices. And probably a couple of hundred cereals to choose from. Same thing with sneakers are now called athletic wear. And this is just a very small section of what's available in terms of media and content and what you have available on your phones, your laptops, etc. The point here is that products are just becoming more and more complex, very, very information-based. This afternoon, I'm going to use these same 2 slides to talk about Autoliv manufacturing company, and just going to make the same point that lots of variety, lots of velocity and volume in the product production industry, or I call it big product, so to speak, instead of big data. So here's what we're going to talk about today, trends in content production. Why is managing this production metadata very important to the business? How does it reduce costs, increase revenue? And some of the challenges that these studios and other content producers are coming up against when it comes to managing production metadata. And then we'll go into a project that was done among the Entertainment Technology Center, MarkLogic, and Disney. It was an actual 20-minute movie that was made called The Suitcase. We'll see a little bit of it. You guys can watch the whole thing. We'll give you the URL. And then we'll put it all together, show how MarkLogic plays a role, and you'll see the demo here at the end. Okay, so what are trends that we are seeing? As I mentioned, I work in Los Angeles, talk to a number of folks at Disney, Warner Brothers, the various studios, and also colleagues of mine at MarkLogic that deal with media and publishing. What we're seeing is there's a lot of competition for this infinite shelf space. And what we mean by that is you guys, just through your iPhones, you have such a wide variety of things you could look at. And your choices are pretty much endless. Well, the content producers are competing for your attention. So the shelf space is infinite, but they got to figure out what to target, what to put on there, how to attract your attention. The advertisers are very interested in getting your eyeballs. So that's a very big trend in figuring out what to produce on this shelf space. They want to leverage their existing assets. Disney is, I think, over 90 years old, maybe 95 years old. They have a lot of content going way back to Mickey Mouse, right? Same thing with Warner Brothers and Bugs Bunny and some of the other studios. So those are assets. Those are revenue-producing entities that they have. This third bullet is very, very important, and it's a trend because Years ago, when everyone watched linear TV, they still do, you know, shows are on at 8 o'clock on Sunday night, but now it's more nonlinear. They had to deal with like Nielsen ratings and surveys to try to figure out what to deliver to you. But today, now that you're viewing this content through your iPhones, through your set-top boxes, through your laptops, they know something about you, and you've given them information, right? You've signed on to their websites. They probably know your age, your gender, and maybe where you live, right? But again, as you watch things, and you do swiping, and you do favoriting, and you do tweets, they know your behavior. So they want to leverage this information about the content and about your behavior, about your demographic profiles. And this is a trend in analytics to help deliver the right content to you at the right time. And then these last two bullets are more on the back end. They're integrating information and processes just for process efficiency, for just to enhance their business. And then the last bullet here, it's all about flexibility. And you've been at MarkLogic World now for a couple of days. You hear about security, reliability, the enterprise features. I think one of the major themes is the flexible platform that we deliver and that what customers are really looking for to just adapt to business environment, technology, and consumer desires. And that really is exposed in content delivery. Very, very, very important. Okay, so why is managing production metadata important? Well, in general, with any industry, any company, there's two broad categories. You want to decrease cost and you want to increase revenue. And on decreasing cost side, in the production of movies and TV, there's a lot of duplicate data entry. We'll see that the process itself is ad hoc, it's project-based, and this tends to do a lot of duplicate work and there's a lot of inefficiencies. So by managing the metadata, they can decrease that duplication. Also, duplicating assets, right? Particularly with digital assets. You might have a scene that you've created in another movie that you could reuse in your up-and-coming film, or even physical assets that are located in warehouses. If you don't have the metadata to tell you where those physical assets are, you might have a model shop build another monster or something like that. It's a bit of extreme. And then finding data. Without having a handle on this metadata, you need to find it. So, if you have to do a tribute to an actor that just deceased and you want to get it on the nightly news real quick or on the weekend news, you don't want to have to hire a bunch of interns to go through all your content to find this information. It's very helpful to be able to find assets and information about this person. And then relating data is very, very important, and this is becoming more prevalent to hit that bullet that I mentioned about matching your content to the user. You don't want to have to rely on just relational type relationships, the one-to-many or the primary key to the foreign key. You want to have more of a semantic relationship among your data elements. So that's a trend we're seeing, the adoption of semantics. And then the lost project lessons learned. As I mentioned, this is a lot of the efforts in bringing movies and TV video to the home is done on a project basis. And because it's ad hoc, they don't always capture the lessons and leverage it in the next go-round. In terms of increasing revenue, by having information, by knowing where it is, you can help future product development. So at NBC, they have an opportunity that we're pursuing there to just help them understand how they've made things in the past so that they look at them, just create better deals to be more efficient. Assist in asset reuse. We mentioned that with a digital archive, there are a lot of assets that you can use on film, whether they're locations, storylines, products that that have been placed in these various scenes, you can make use of that. And then this trend toward massive customization. Again, this is the ability to understand the content, understand the user, and deliver things like maybe alternate movie endings or eventually an entire script dedicated just to you, kind of like Total Recall, if you remember, where you tell them who you want to be and they put you in the scene. They might make an entire movie with you in it in virtual reality. We're not there yet, but you can see that coming. So these are the trends that we see in the movie production industry. So some of the challenges with managing this metadata. The first is there are several different types of metadata. So there are, other people might classify these differently, but these are the four general categories. Transactional, these are things like the contracts and the rights on how, and mostly this deals with the digital distribution. Same thing with the technical information. What's the format, camera output, storage. These other two, the structural and descriptive, that's what we're going to show in this demonstration. Descriptive metadata, it's information. A lot of the studios are tagging their content. They're going scene by scene and putting in who's the character, who is the actor, the talent, what's the storyline. And this is so that they know what the content is, and they can match it to the user that's looking at this content. So it's somewhat complex in managing these different metadata types and using them effectively. And here is the process, okay, project-based. This is what I kicked off, the know a guy who knows a guy and let's do lunch kind of thing. These are how movies come together today. And people, you have what's called these snowflake workflows. Each production is unique. And until you get to an environment where you can have standard data formats, standardize some of the process, you're going to lose some of the information, some of the lessons that you learned in producing a movie. And you end up with this siloed data. And you've heard about the problems that this can cause throughout many of the presentations here at MarkLogic. And showing this in a graphic, this is a life cycle that's sort of reminiscent of many production processes. You have a creative stage or an inception stage in manufacturing. It's concept design, manufacturing, and distribution. Well, in the movie industry, you have inception, various production stages, distribution, and archive. And for instance, it starts with the script. There's an application called Final Draft. Is a very popular program for writing your script. But once that's submitted and accepted, it's analyzed, and that data gets spread out into different silos. The content is put into a specific database, as you might be developing some taxonomies. If you're using semantics, you're starting to relate the data. And as you move along, these other stages in the life cycle also produce data that goes into these various different silos. It's not integrated. So what happens? You end up either doing this manually, passing around spreadsheets and Word documents, or you get bogged down in technology, making point-to-point connections between these various applications and the underlying data repository. And you don't really know the cost of this data, what it costs to produce it, or the value of this information, this asset, as it flows through your life cycle, your information life cycle. So, and then the final thing, this is not very agile. It's not very flexible. And the movie industry, just like any other industry, needs to respond to customer needs, competition, and just the entire business environment. Okay? Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Eric now, and he's going to talk about this project we did a little over a year ago. It was a 20-minute film. Derek, you can talk a little bit more about it, but it's kind of cool in what was done in collecting metadata and making some good use out of it.
Mm-hmm. So hi, I'm Eric Weaver. I work for the ETC. What the ETC is, really quickly, is a nonprofit think tank. The problem in the industry we had was there's a lot of technological change coming up. And about 23 years ago, this organization was founded by George Lucas and the School of Cinematic Arts at USC. So as they saw this change coming, they needed to basically have a place where all the senior leaders could come together and agree on things that was beneficial to the community at large. For example, some of the projects we've taken on in the past include DCI, or the digital cinema. So we help create digital cinema and export it because instead of having a bunch of vendors going in a million different directions, the senior leaders decided to take control. And IMF, or the Interoperable Master Format, is another thing that we've also done. So I report directly to the CTO of Disney, Warner Brothers, Universal, Paramount, Sony, and Fox in my daily tasks here. So the Suitcase, basically what the Suitcase is an R&D project that the studios fund. This particular one was funded by Universal and Disney. Disney was the biggest contributor to this particular project. And so basically what it is it's an opportunity to do an actual film or create something and reach some of these technological objectives. Because doing R&D within a studio is very, very expensive. You have things like SAG and other very high cost pieces. So we decided to take on some of these projects, and we actually have a new one, which is pretty cool, coming out soon too. But the Suitcase is about a baggage handler who finds a bag during 9/11, and he looks inside of it and he realizes it belongs to one of the terrorists, and he has to make a moral dilemma decision. And this is actually based on a true story, and we're pretty proud of the director because she ended up getting it into Tribeca this year, and BAFTA and Palm Springs Film Festival. So what were the core goals here on this project? The first one was next generation cloud-based workflows, understanding the different tools and aspects in which you can leverage the cloud, from ingest, store, transcode, orchestrate, other things. The second one was framework. As part of the job that I ran, I looked at how you do interoperability between the studios and the clouds. So I focused there on transport, security. We helped rewrite the security best practices for the MPAA, metadata, storage, long-term storage and archive, and finally a common framework. And C4 is actually the framework piece, which we're standardizing through SMPTE, which is the Society of Technical Motion Picture Engineers, and releasing out there. The next aspect was the metadata piece, which you're seeing here. And then, I don't know if anybody of you care or know, but high dynamic range was another major important theme. So before I get into this real quick, actually, do we have a slide on C4?
I think it's down
a
couple.
Okay.
Yeah,
just want to make sure.
It's 2 down.
So like you said, there's a lot of different databases coming in. And this concept of Snowflake workflow is absolutely how everything is done. A lot of people think that a studio is producing a movie. A studio doesn't produce a movie. A production company produces a movie. And so you have every single time a production company is brought together, they can use whatever they want. All these different software technologies, these tools, these pieces, and they all build it as they go. And Leon Silverman, pretty much one of the main people at Disney, kind of coined that term of this Snowflake workflow. So in this situation, we've got a lot of different things, from the camera to the script, to the synchronized, to the final draft, movie magic. And he wasn't underestimating the thought about recreating data. We actually have people in basements that are sitting there trying to figure out data we already knew. We knew this data about all of these things because it exists in all these places. You had to have it to create the film. But people manually going in and doing that. And you can't do that through a system like Mechanical Turk because this is pre-release content. So it has to be kept under the covers. So here's a little bit of the workflow. We were using C4 in the cornerstone there, MarkLogic, and a couple other tools. Schema agnostic, data integration, some of the key aspects. So what is C4? C4 is our framework piece. So what you need when you're communicating with a lot of different people is an ability to identify an asset without a registry-based system. Consistent identification without communication is the principal concept here, which is basically a format for a hashing algorithm. Any digital asset now can be hashed based on its content. And so now if Technicolor has a copy of an asset and Disney has a copy of an asset, they know it's exactly the same asset. And this is really, really important because it opens up the door to the foundation to build a lot of new technologies or tool sets upon. So for example, this allows for indelible metadata. And indelible metadata is the concept in which you basically, anybody who touches these assets along the line can then relate any kind of metadata they have to that to another database. So Traditionally, in our industry, we use either sidecar or embedded files, but a lot of times we'll delete those embedded files, or the sidecars, I mean, in other things, or different programs will strip the embedded data. And we won't want this. We want to be able to keep some of this knowledge or create these relationships between different things. And so having that centralized tool like that is very valuable. There's a lot of other really important values of this. We're working on things like computational archives and transport networks that improve that. But if you want any information on this, I can send you some documents. And it's all based on a common recipe API. So some of the applications you're going to see in this is we pretty much focused on descriptive metadata. And the reason we did some of this and scene metadata is because Disney didn't care as much about the technical metadata in this situation because they were hiring a company to do all of this work that they couldn't really enforce a standard. So they were primarily focused on this stuff, and that's what you'll see here. Being able to navigate scenes, check out things. Have anybody here seen X-Ray by Amazon? Just one or two people? So it's an application in which you can basically stop a show that you've taken in on Amazon and see different pieces of data about that show. Well, this took the exact opposite approach. This took it pre-production and production on that side. So you could take all of those different databases and find information about it and be able to understand what was going on with the show. And gave a search ability and semantic connections. Yep. I'll let you.
Okay. Yeah. So that was kind of an overview of the ETC and the Disney MarkLogic project, how we put this together. But this is just to relate the features of MarkLogic that were used in this little project. And you can see that there are many different applications that are used in producing a movie. Things like Final Draft that I already mentioned, Movie Magic covers the budgeting and props and script notes, and Avid is used for getting the dailies and editing them and bringing everything into the final production. It's an integration problem, and MarkLogic helps in bringing that all together. Obviously, search helps as well because you need to find these assets. And then the enterprise features are important because a lot of this is contractual based. So a lot of the information starts with the contract, whether it's between an actor and a studio or between studios. And if you want to, someone described this process to me, a director might see an extra in the film and want to give that person a line. And that happens frequently, I think, from what I understand. That kicks off a whole series of processes that are based on the contract, and they don't want to just pass the contract around because there's information in there that are just, it's sensitive. So security, that's just a small example of where security plays a role in streamlining these processes. So now, one of the other things, as we mentioned, is the trend toward relating the information in the content with what's happening with your users and your user community. They're using ontologies to describe this content. Okay, so as you can see, in this case, you have characters that, oh, my eyes are, you might have your character lives in London and it's played by a particular actor. Character's a detective, and the film, this is part of a series, could be a crime thriller or an action type series. This is what allows the studio to understand the content beyond, as I mentioned, what you can get from a relational database, whether it's one-to-many or primary key to foreign key. This gives you that higher level of abstraction to match the content to the user's desires. So what you have is a situation where, say, an 18-year-old male might be watching an action film, and a 60-year-old grandmother might be watching that same film, and they both might click like or tweet some favorable things about that film. Well, that's great, but what are you going to, you're going to recommend something differently to each user, and I'm not going to stereotype the grandmother or the 18-year-old, but it's just going to be a different path that both would follow. And how do you make that recommendation? Well, you need to know the content, what's in that content, the actors, the characters, the storyline. Maybe the grandmother liked it for the storyline, maybe the 18-year-old. That is a little bit stereotypical, but she might have liked the storyline, and the 18-year-old maybe liked the fact that it was just action, okay? But these are the things you need to know to take the consumer on a different path and get it right. And you do that by understanding the content and the user, and ontologies play a big role. So what did we do with Disney and the ETC? This is the process that they followed to create what you're going to see is a more enriching experience for viewing the content, which in this case is the 20-minute short film. So they created this ontology. This is a short version of what you saw on the previous slide. So they have a talent playing a character in a scene. And they match that up with a control vocabulary so that they can get their authority list for characters and scenes. And then the other step, they have this application where they do temporal annotation. So it's manual today. They sit workers down and they put scene by scene in front of these workers, and they have drop downs that are filled with these ontology, that are filled by the ontology, and they tag who's the character, who's the actor, what's the storyline, what's the genre of this particular scene. And they create triples, MarkLogic triples, that go into MarkLogic through this data integration step. And then the next part is the complex query construction. So we have the user interface where user clicks on a button and you go ask an interesting question of the database, whether it's about the storyline or the characters, and then you bring it back and you service it in the application. So that's, it's focused on descriptive metadata as opposed to the other three that we talked about, structural and administrative. Technical. What's that? Transactional, yeah. But this is where the studios see value in capturing that descriptive metadata. So this is what we delivered, and I'm going to show you a live demo. This is the main screen, and you're able to do this nonlinear navigation. Now, if you want, you could watch the content from beginning to end, but in many cases, the user might want to stop, check out characters, check out external sources. This is the studio's attempt to get that we call it the power user or the super fan. The super fan really is a terminology that we've heard. And the production data is important because that's where you capture things like director's intent or the cinematographer's intent, or maybe script notes, or some interesting things about the location, or things that went on behind the scene. This is very, very valuable information for reaching that long tail of users among your community. So this is the kind of thing they wanted to create in this demo. And let me go ahead and switch to a browser and show you a little bit of it. Okay, so it's called a Suitcase, and those are the companies that were involved. And I'm just going to play this. We won't watch the whole thing. There we go. So as Eric mentioned, he's about a baggage handler at Logan Airport. He comes across a suitcase that has some terrorist information in it. Did you say it was based on a true story? So let's say I'm one of these users that don't like to watch a movie from beginning to end, and I talk to one of my friends that says they've watched it and say, oh, you need to see a great scene that's right around the 12-minute mark. So I go ahead and I just fast forward over here to, let's go like here, see if something exciting happens.
Wait, hold on! It's not my hand!
Okay, so that's an exciting scene. Well, the reason I stopped it is because I want to know a little bit more about what's going on here. So this is the enriched experience that I have. Now, once I stop it, And we wanted to create this Amazon X-ray-like experience. So Eric was mentioning it, but if you've ever watched an Amazon movie on your iPhone or iPad that's been, what do you call it, X-ray-fied or something, or it conforms to the X-ray state, you could stop it just like I did, and what will pop up is metadata about the characters, the scene, and things like that. So we created that experience here in this demonstration. So if I'm interested in characters, I can expand this, and I see the actors' names and the talent, and I could go ahead, I have a link out to IMDB. So if I'm interested in the main character, his name is Joe Franek, his real name is Mojan Arya. So I could just, find out a little bit more about this guy, how he's doing, if he's going to be a big star. So that's as a consumer. Now, as a movie, not a producer, but someone who works in the industry, maybe in marketing, or I'm developing a new project, I might be interested in the locations. So this is technical metadata, or not so much transactional. It's metadata that applies to the creation of the movie as opposed to the experience. This was actually filmed at San Bernardino International Airport. So that's one of the airports outside of Los Angeles. It's a small piece of information, but I can use this to find out things like cost information, contact, regulatory information that I might need for my project. So it helps me in maybe reducing my costs for my next project.
It's also
yes.
continuity. So
Yeah.
you always want to make sure that you're having continuity, especially if you're doing multiple scenes or having to reshoot or other things like that. Because fan people will basically call you out on all the things that you missed that aren't in continuity, and so it helps with those kind of things.
Yeah. So that's production metadata. That's found.
We actually had we also have all the materials coming from the props, the wardrobe stuff, all of that stuff as well, coming off of Sync on Set. It's not right there, but
yeah. So again, this is a demonstration. A lot of that information can be incorporated in here, and you can get that to the person looking at producing another film or with their project. And then this is getting back to the super fan that might be interested in the storylines. So here you see there's various storylines that are being played out. Here, Joe, he dreams of becoming a pilot, the professional relationship, what scenes were happening. Let's look at this one. These are all the scenes where Joe discovered the terrorist suitcase and what he has to do about it. So you could jump to each of these different scenes and just explore the movie by a particular storyline. In other movies, it might be the love interest between two characters, and you might just want to see those scenes.
So another example of this is consider watching The Godfather and being able to follow just the certain storylines in themselves, in continuity, as opposed to the jumping about of the story.
That's a good example.
Something like that with this.
That's a good example. I remember in Godfather 1, Carlo Rizzi was the one. Sonny beat him up, and you just want to see all the things that led up to him getting.
Yeah.
When he gets strangled at the end, I think. A little bit of morbid example, but and then you could go back to exploring all the characters in those scenes, and then you might be interested in a particular character, so you get all the scenes that particular character is in, and then maybe you're going to jump back to one of the scenes and play it. So this is that's the demo, and it's really just showing how with this movie metadata, this production metadata, you can deliver this enriched experience, the type of experience that people are engaging in today, as opposed to going straight from start to finish. It's a nonlinear navigation through movies, and in some cases, I've seen where they might show, Warner Brothers was doing this, they were having a showing of movies like Batman and having the director be available so people can ask questions directly to the director and fans can interact. So that's the kind of experience that people are looking for these days, and we've demonstrated that with this project. So let me just jump back, got a couple more slides here. Okay. So we mentioned trends in the production of movies, and one of the last things, I think it was the last bullet, the studios that we talked to, they're interested in developing this flexible media and entertainment platform. And this fits in with many of the diagrams you've seen over the last couple of days, where they're able to take in information from various sources, whether they're relational or file systems or social media, bring it in, harmonize it, and then in some cases, they're using partner-type applications like Expert Systems and SmartLogic to semantically enrich this information. So they want to tag characters, locations, products, and then bring that back into MarkLogic, combine it with ontologies, and then provide a series of services that go through this microservices layer. So this is an effort for them to remain independent from the back-end technologies and just be very, very flexible in delivering things like transactional applications, analytical, and then to downstream systems. So this is what's happening in the industry. And the life cycle that you saw before turns out to be something more like this, where it's not point-to-point integration, but it's an integrated platform, and you don't get bogged down in the technology, so there's lots of cost savings there. You understand better the cost and the value of your data and your assets, and as it flows through the system. And you've got this more agile, flexible platform because of your ability to bring your data in, find it, relate it at a semantic level, and then deliver it to the consumers. Okay? So that's it. I think we have plenty of time for questions, at least 10 minutes here, maybe more. Anybody want to ask a question? You want to see this? Well, we could spend the next 10 minutes watching that movie, at least half of it.
Oh. We actually have this really cool mic thing that I get to throw at you.
So you guys get to toss it around.
Ready?
You work? It does. Okay. Why would a suicide bomber check in a suitcase?
What was the question?
Why would a suicide bomber check in a suitcase?
Why would a suicide bomber? Oh, we should get the director on for this.
We're not certain. I mean, I would assume that he's trying to get rid of the evidence because he had all of this with him, and he wanted to look like a normal passenger, possibly. I don't know, but it was the breaking piece of information that really helped them understand what was going on.
And is that part of the story that's true?
From what I understand.
Ah.
Yes.
Here we go.
So what do you do as far as things with behind the scenes, or like in the DVD, when the DVD comes out and you've got a bunch of extras in that, is this capable of capturing all of that information too, as far as deleted scenes, behind the scenes information, things like that?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
It just depends on what they want to release. The studio wants to release, because some of the things that you saw here could be used on both sides. Could just be used internally for production knowledge, or it could be used in aspects of extras and for fan base. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll give you another anecdote. We were talking to New Regency. They were the studio behind The Revenant. One of the reports they like to generate is something called cast participation. So sometimes in a movie like that, because there were a lot of people that didn't have visas, they need to know who's in the final cut of the movie. So the metadata helps them track that, so they know who to pay, so they don't overpay. So cast participation is a very key report that they have to produce in the industry to cut costs. Okay, because somebody says, I was in that scene, you have to pay me, and they have to be able to prove that they either were or they weren't. So that's
that particular movie was really hard for them to break down because of so much makeup and stuff. Who is that? I can't really tell when I'm looking at the scene which each person was, but that is on a report somewhere.
Yeah, and another report they were in something called product placement, and that's a revenue thing, because if they show something like a can of Coke in there, they need to get revenue for that. So by having the metadata, they can get that revenue. Yes.
Okay, so I had two questions. One is, who has access to this? Is it only the studio or the production business people? And second, is it a cast of millions that update this metadata?
So on the first half, this was just an R&D project. This could be had by any one of the
Oh, okay,
key
so
studios.
It's not being done now.
No, we didn't release this for anything. We just built this and kind of show it, and we'd be willing to share it or give it to people. It doesn't matter to us. It was just an R&D test that was paid for by some of the studios that
Oh, cool.
to understand it.
It's a problem that's ripe for a solution, and MarkLogic works with various systems integrators, and we've started putting something together with
So it's
certain
like a pilot.
Well, this was a POC, but if you attend these industry summits, like the Hollywood IT Summit is next week in Los Angeles, and there's always talk about wrangling the metadata in production. It's still a problem. It's getting better, but it's a problem. We've got it pretty much done, although there's always room for improvement, on the distribution side of the house. That's much more automated. As a matter of fact, MarkLogic at Warner Brothers, they have something called a TOPS portal where companies can log in, look for information, look for assets, and get it delivered automatically. Much more streamlined. But on the production side of the house, still a lot of work to be done there.
And can
You
from
wanna-
the maintaining the metadata, so that would be, I mean, was there a lot of work on that?
So one of the things that was a little bit of a trick here is that we found that we had to find a particular point in time to lock down the metadata. Like, we couldn't just keep grabbing it and then saying that is the final one. So we had to take a snapshot in time, which was closer to a finished cut. And then in this situation, just left it at that. But I'm sure that you could update it or...
Did you have a question, Chris? Here you go.
So this studio and production company, I can really understand the motivation of the studio for wanting to have this metadata because they have the assets. What about the production company? How does the studio get the production company to be interested in using this tool? And what are the motivations of the production company?
Many times it's a contract
Yeah, okay. Oh, so
that says
literally
this is
they
what you're
require it
delivering
in
to
the
me.
contract. Yeah.
You are delivering this data. So one of the approaches we always take, or the ETC and the C4 project has taken, is making it as easy as possible to do without any real manual problem. So C4 is just a hash, of a file. So it's not something that's going to take a bunch of extra time or anything else. That stuff can be done later in different points.
Yeah, that's one of the main problems because it's a fragmented set of players. Anyone else?
Oh, she raised hers.
Oh, did I?
So was
I'm
one of the
sorry. I'll get you next.
so was one of the goals to develop the metadata models, reusable metadata models that you could sort of prescribe to the industry, so that that's not heavy lifting that has to reoccur each time a project.
So that's a longer term goal.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
and eventually you can get into and that's something that Hollywood has tried a couple times, which has been very challenging for Hollywood to create an ontology taxonomy that's universally accepted. Because even in different parts of the workflow, people might be saying one word that means something different to somebody in the beginning than it does in another part of the film. So that is a bit tricky. And then where we want to go with it eventually is tagging different types of scenes. So for example, action scenes, car chase scenes, other things that might expand further for that search capability. So that's kind of where we're going towards. But yes, we are working on pulling a team back together. But we hope people like Tom from Warner Brothers might help us there.
Let's get
Sorry,
one
he's in the room. I'm giving him a hard time.
more. There you go.
So with this kind of metadata, will it be possible to see the background information? For example, if someone is curious as to what's going on behind the scenes in that situation, like the airplane obviously had crashed, exploded. How did the suitcase kind of got preserved? Where do you get the suitcase? Was the suitcase transported? Was the luggage transported in some other way?
Actually,
Was the luggage
those
not
answers
in
are
the
actually in the short. Basically, what happened was it was supposed to be, he tried to carry the bag onto the plane with him, and they said it was too large. And the baggage handler was supposed to take it and get it on the plane, and instead he is fiscally desperate and looks inside of it to take something.
Oh,
And
yes,
he does not get it on the plane.
Right, but I'm curious, like if somebody wants to have a background
Yes.
knowledge, is there like a link to Wikipedia or a link to some US.gov regulations?
That would be easy to add, but
Yeah.
Not in this situation.
Yeah, that's definitely something that can be added as for the
He is the
super
master
fan.
of the cube.
Anybody else?
We got some back there. And
You got another one?
What is the process by which a movie producer would feed information to a source like IMDB? So, is it by collaboration?
That's a mighty mystery in itself, actually. IMDB is a really, it's kind of a crowdsourced thing to some extent. A lot of times the people on the production will put data up on IMDB, so IMDB is not always completely correct. So you got to be careful with that. And that's one of the major differences between this tool and the X-ray tool. The X-ray tool is simply pulling metadata off IMDB. I think there's another database that's a little more thorough than IMDB, or you go to IMDB Pro, but it's just crowdsourced for the most part for that.
Got one back there.
You used a combination of different data, both binary and I'm assuming XML files. Did your images have accompanying XML files for your team to tag it or annotate it? Because I'm just worried, how did you incorporate all the binary data in this project?
So we're not storing the film itself. We're just storing the metadata. Okay, so the binary data was used, the video was used in that MAP3 application that Disney has. They were dealing with the binary data, they had the application, and what came out of that was the triples that was generated by the users that said storyline, character, etc. And that's what's in MarkLogic. Then we just delivered it up in a web application that brought that information together.
So I wanted to make one more comment over here about the schemas and taxonomies and ontologies. We are actually looking to release that stuff. Disney has gotten approval to basically open source some of that content there. The CTO, when I was talking to him, Jamie Voris, said, it's not, there's no real value for us to own this alone. It's better as a community.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of those things that if you have a standard around movie ontologies, you could then start adding competitive differentiation based on the high-level services that you offer, as opposed to owning the underlying, ontology.
We might have one more time for one last question.
Who wants the last question?
No?
You have to offer a prize.
In fact, there's one real quick. So actually, I can answer that. The ETC has its own initiative on AI and cognitive or machine-based learning as well. Eve Berquist runs that, the guy who founded the company that did the talking robot that basically had the interview on Nightline. So very, very brilliant fellow. He is working very heavily with the studios to be looking at aspects of that.
Yeah, and some of the early technologies that are getting incorporated is just facial recognition, obviously, and then not just identifying a face, but who belongs to that face, logo recognition, and then some other things like scene recognition as well. Is this a fight scene? Is it a love scene? Is it a political scene? Stuff like that.
Actually, what's more creepy than that is
More
they're
creepy.
doing testing at
Lots of
people
creepy
coming
stuff.
out of theaters with video cameras looking at facial recognition to see, in small test cases, how their response is to the movie when they leave. So we're seeing some of that begin to pop up. So they're basically using AI in specialty cameras outside of the theater. So when you exit the theater, this is on specialty test case. This isn't your average theater. So when people are leaving, they can judge their expressions of content or discontent with the film. Yeah.
It's all to provide better service.
Yeah. So I guess the last question is, where do you get a copy of the film or see it? Ask Michael, not me.
Yes. Shoot me an email.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.